Thanks, Nathaniel. Grades are coming out fast. This is the panel on witness and its relevance for today. And that's kind of a larger than you might think question, because this work is clearly a classic in my mind and that of many others. And the test of a classic is whether it remains relevant with the changing times and changing cultures. If it can do that, then it can fight its way continually in the world of great books. And certainly this has all of the elements of it, many of them really quite strange and almost mythological. The strange matter of Lionel Trilling writing in the middle of the journey before Witness comes out, a book about Whittaker Chambers, in which literary critics find the Alger Hiss character, but Trilling never heard of Alger Hiss. Strange kind of prefiguration there. And then the images, driving all night to hide documents in a pumpkin on his farm. The old Woodstock typewriter and the typeface that told the story. The prothonotary warbler that Richard Nixon used to trap Hiss in his cross-examination. And these things, they live in a kind of mythological memory. It was in the New York Times about 3 weeks ago or so. In a little box, A11 or something, a prothonotary warbler had appeared in New York City, in Manhattan. And the Times had photographed it, and they made the reference to the work we're going to talk about today. And then I think a classic status was enhanced by the seemingly never-ending decades of controversy in which the defenders of Alger Hiss tried to make their slanders of the author of Witness stick. Today I want to introduce three panelists, and this is an amazingly powerful group we have here all at once, and then leave it to them. They'll take it over, each, I hope, making their remarks about 10 minutes, and then we'll open it for further discussion. Elliott Abrams has had a remarkable string of positions of enormous importance. I know him going back to the early Reagan years. He began, in my knowledge, with human rights. That was really something intellectually to come in behind the Jimmy Carter kind of invention of human rights in the State Department through Pat Darien, in charge of Latin American affairs, and then positions in the White House. In every case, he really always brought a deeply moral and intellectual realm into the work that he was doing in practice and in policy. And now he is the truth teller in an entirely new career, it seems to me, on an issue of the Middle East and the Arab-Israeli problem, telling the truth where the truth is very rarely to be found or not twisted. And I must say, speaking of classics, I just want to give a plug to, I think the first book he did, maybe not the first, but called Undue Process, which is a classic of Washington. I think no one should go to Washington without reading that book. Max Boot, in this time when the laws of war and the strange asymmetries of warfare, the principles of strategy seem to be overwhelmed or out of date, he has become the authoritative voice on military affairs, always with amazing, consistent, unquestioned integrity, which is also a kind of a rarity in a field which is marked often by politicization and score settling. And his Invisible Armies looks like being a major work. I haven't seen that yet. We're looking forward to that. Jay Nordlinger, who I just met a moment ago, I think we all here realize that serious thought on international affairs requires the widest range of reference, that you can't just focus on one corner of the strategic realm. And when you see his name in the author's line, you know that you're about to get something with tremendous explanatory power and with writings that go across into the culture of the country and the arts, beyond the usual Washingtoniana. And also he deserves great praise for finally calling to account that annual fraud, the Nobel Peace Prize. After his book, They Call It Peace, no one can ever say Nobel Peace Prize again without saying so ironically. So I'll turn it over to them, and I think we'll start with Elliott, if that's okay.
Thank you, Charlie. We first met when I was a very young, callow assistant secretary trying to figure out how to get around the Department of State, and I got guidance into the true secrets of how the department works from Charlie, who was then the top assistant to Secretary Schultz. Those secrets remain buried. We're not going to talk about that. Don't worry. I have a few points to make and a couple of questions to raise about the ways in which Witness, and one might say more generally anti-communism, are irrelevant today. First, the place where Witness, I think, clearly is relevant, and that's when we deal with the great communist power of the day, China. Chambers, this is a passage I like. Chambers wrote, "What I had been fell from me like dirty rags. The rags that fell from me were not only communism. What fell was the whole web of the materialist modern mind, the luminous shroud which it has spun about the spirit of man, paralyzing in the name of rationalism the instinct of his soul for God, denying in the name of knowledge the reality of the soul and its birthright in that mystery on which mere knowledge falters and shatters at every step." Close quote. We now watch the soulless Chinese Communist Party battle Chinese Christians, Chinese Buddhists, and believe that if they can only offer a few more apartments or better factory jobs in port cities, that will provide the answer to the Chinese people's yearnings for freedom. Everything that, in that sense, that Chambers wrote about communism and its failures is quite applicable, I think. The tougher question, or a tougher question, is the relevance of what he wrote to our struggle today with Islamism. Here, the other side relies on faith, and our side, especially in Europe, seems to rely on materialism. This was a struggle of the human soul, Chambers wrote, but we often seem to believe that the answer to Islamism is simply, more employment opportunities for Saudi youth. We're, in a sense, in the position that we criticize the Chinese leadership for having. But even here on the Islamic question, Chambers had some interesting things to say. He wrote that, quote, "The difference between liberalism and communism was in degree only." This question arose in the previous panel. Continuing, "Both put their faith in man and rejected faith in God. Therefore, they shared a common worldview." There is a lesson here, I think. Chambers held that we could not fight communism best with its near relation, liberalism. Were he alive, I think he would say we cannot fight violent Islamist extremism with an ideology that is different from it in degree only and shares a common worldview with it, namely nonviolent Islamist extremism. If that seems obvious to you, it has not been obvious to many governments around the world. For example, the government of the United Kingdom, which spent about a decade financing and promoting what it saw as nonviolent Islamist extremist groups under the theory that only they could talk to and dissuade the violent extremists, only to conclude in the end really about the end of the Blair period, that the shared